all of life for women is a dom-sub scenario. It's just that we don't get to have any pleasure from it. Hi, I'm Summer Tothill. Every week on my Instagram, I run a Q&A with my followers. They ask me their questions about how gender equality and oppression is affecting them in their world, and I answer. If you join me on Instagram, you can take part in the Q&A, ask your own questions, get your answers, get involved. If you enjoy a dom-sub dynamic in your sex life, can you still be a feminist? That is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. This is a sticky subject, but it's definitely one of those two things can be true at the same time scenarios. Once, dom-sub relationships between men and women can be just a replica of the uneven power dynamics that already exist between us, and can be a space to enable usually men to enact abusive behaviors against women with impunity. At the same time, dom-sub sexual dynamics can be an incredibly fun and validating and productive, consensual way for two people to have a bit of imaginary fun in the bedroom. We can't blanket condemn things like BDSM and power imbalance relationships in our sex lives just because power imbalances exist in our erstwhile lives. Increasingly, single men on the dating scene are expecting to be able to introduce BDSM dynamics, particularly the DS aspect, the dom-sub aspect, into their sexual encounters with women they have just met. They are expecting to be able to enact a dominant sexual role that may involve some violence, that may involve some bondage, and without actually having really any experience in kink, and without being a part of any kind of kink community or going on like a self-education journey about kink. Others have astutely observed that a lot of the time, men who declare on the dating apps that they want to have some dom-sub type fun in the bedroom are actually just men who want an excuse to hit women. I think the stumbling block that we come up against is that people don't necessarily understand that kink scenarios actually have to be negotiated with more communication, more healthy discussion, more transparency, and more explicit consent than your average sexual encounter that two straight people will have. Two straight people can go home together with no discussion whatsoever about what either of them likes in the bedroom, what their limits are, what they expect. Two straight people will hop into bed together, and one of them will assume that he is putting part of his body inside part of the other one's body, and that's it, that's what we're going to do, and we don't need to talk about it. Kinky scenarios can be significantly healthier from a consent and satisfaction and pleasure standpoint. But the important thing with dom-sub relationships is that they are negotiated, and they have to be built on a foundation of safety and consent and consideration and respect for each other's pleasure. Dom-sub relationships can be a fantastic place for people to play out imaginary scenarios without causing any actual harm, particularly when you consider that all of life for women is a dom-sub scenario. It's just that we don't get to have any pleasure from it. And indeed, there are a lot of strong feminists and strong women who are attracted to being the sub in the dom-sub scenario because, for once, we don't have to be the ones doing all the thinking, experiencing decision fatigue, doing all of the considering and the attending. It is the dominant role's job to do the planning, the thinking, the doing, the pleasing, just all of that like administrative labor. As a woman, it can be quite relaxing to know that you're giving power to someone whose job is just to take care of everything. But yes, you absolutely do have to be on the lookout for men who want to play the role of dom, and even if they think that they're doing it right, they can absolutely default into ideas where they're like, well, no, you have to do this because you've agreed to be my sub. And it's like, well, no, actually, every single thing we do still has to be consented to, agreed, and worked out as something that will please both of us. There is a lot of genuine exploitation going on in sexual dom-sub dynamics between people, but I really want to stress that that is not what they foundationally are. They are foundationally an extremely fun way to effectively play pretend. If it's empowering and consensual and pleasurable for you, I think that can absolutely be feminist, particularly if what you're getting out of it is significantly more sexual pleasure and significantly more orgasms. Is the fact that cooking, like home cooking, is considered women's work and most professional chefs are men, related to the gender pay gap? Short answer, yes. Long answer, let's look at why. So something I have talked about before is that when industries go from being mostly populated by men to mostly worked by women, they become lower paid. So this really puts paid to that argument that men in my comments often make, which is that if women really were cheaper to hire, then businesses would only ever hire women. No, in fact, what happens is we don't actually value or respect the work of women, or we don't respect that they have the ability to do good work. So we don't put them in positions where we believe that it requires a good worker. So men still end up with more of the jobs and they end up with more of the prestigious jobs. So part of this is that when jobs are done by men, they are seen as more prestigious, and when they are done by women, they are seen as just women's work. You can see this happened with teaching. Teaching used to be a majority male profession, and now it is mostly populated by women, except for management levels, which is a whole other phenomenon called the glass elevator that happens to men, where they get advanced into positions of management quicker than women, even in feminized industries. So because there is this perception that domestic work is women's work, if something happens in the home, we don't value it until men start doing it out of the home, and then we monetarily value it and we let men do it. So there's a prestige to being a chef, but there's no prestige to being a home cook. Most men aren't the cook in their own home because there is no prestige or cachet to being a home cook. Being a home cook is women's work. But there is prestige to being a cook as long as it happens on the world stage in public as part of economic participation. And if you can get economic benefit from doing that work, then it can be men's work. You can see how this has happened historically with other skills and work that women were expected to do. Like when women learn how to sew and make and repair clothes at home, they're a seamstress. But when men did it, they were a tailor, and a tailor was a much more prestigious and higher paid job to do. When women create incredible embroidery and textile art at home, that's just women doing arts and crafts. But when men go out and paint paintings for other notable men and patrons to pay for, that is being a prestigious artist. So yes, you have very astutely observed one of the complex aspects of the pay gap, which relates to the prestige of men's work and the devaluing of what is seen as women's work. And this is why when men in my comments and everybody else's comments say the pay gap doesn't exist because it's illegal to pay women less than men, they are just showing that they fundamentally don't understand what the pay gap actually describes and what it is. And frankly, why would they care? Because they benefit from all of our ignorance on it. That's it for this Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. Find me on Instagram at SummerTothill. That's summer with an O, spelt the same way as you see in this YouTube channel. I can't wait to see you there.